Have you ever seen an animal change someone's destiny? I believe that, deep down, we understand that nature holds secrets and surprises that go far beyond our comprehension. The story I'm about to tell you today isn't just about a battle for life, but about how love and courage can emerge in the most unexpected places. Breaking all the rules we thought existed, it was a hot and stuffy day on the African savanna. The strong sun seemed to cook the earth, and the dry air smelled of dust and burnt grass. In the midst of that heat, a small group moved with a majesty that only wild royalty possesses. They were 3 male lions, owners of a monumental strength, and among them, a single pregnant lioness, her belly already quite round. The pride was small, but united by a bond you only find when life teaches you to depend on a few, but trustworthy, alliances. As they advanced, it seemed that nothing in the world could threaten them. But nature is a box of surprises, and suddenly, an almost imperceptible movement broke the peace. The pregnant lioness, who was walking calmly, was suddenly wrapped in something that, to her, felt like a cold shadow. It was the silent threat of the savanna, the giant African rock python, which had coiled around her body with a terrifying force. A lightning-fast attack, which seemed to come from nowhere. No one was prepared for what would follow. This wasn't a common fight. The scene was a nightmare becoming real, and the only thing separating life from death was the lion's reaction. But what happened in the next few minutes? That you won't believe. And I'm telling you, what happened next will show you that courage has a very different face than the one we imagine. The silence of the hunt was broken by a sound no one expected, the dry hiss of the python's scales sliding over the golden fur of the pregnant lioness. It was a lightning-fast attack, too quick for the mind to process. In a matter of seconds, the giant was coiled around the lioness's body with a force that seemed to come from another world. The air was squeezed from her lungs, and the sound that came out was a guttural moan, more of despair than of rage. You know that feeling when fear squeezes your chest so tight you can barely breathe? She felt that multiplied by 100 in every inch of her body. Check out this curiosity. The constricting force of an adult python is so terrifying it could crush a small car. Can you imagine what that does to a body of flesh and bone? Right, and the lioness, even being the queen, was no match for that raw, ancient power. She tried to struggle, but with every movement, the snake squeezed even tighter, a living, merciless press. Anyone who has ever felt trapped in a hopeless situation, where fighting seems pointless, will understand exactly what she was going through. But no matter how immense the pain, the lioness fought, not for herself, but for the life she carried within her. Motherhood, in any species, is an inexhaustible source of strength. Pause and feel this. The smell of wet earth and the sudden breeze that arrived, seeming like a whisper from a greater power, as if nature itself were paying attention to that struggle. If you love stories that make you feel the emotion of the wild and the force of nature, go ahead and leave that like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any adventure like this. After all, these stories show us that true survival isn't just about strength, but about the will to resist, even when everything tells you to give up. The lesson here is simple. Never underestimate a mother's instinct to protect her family. And do you know what was most surreal about this whole scene? Of terror? The 3 male lions of the pride. They were there, just a few feet away, standing, just watching. The python might have been a strange enemy, but why were terror and hesitation written on the faces of the most powerful predators on the continent? The scene was breathtaking. 3 enormous male lions, with their majestic manes swaying gently. In the wind, were just a few feet away, but it was as if there were an invisible barrier between them and the lioness. Hesitation hung in the air, as thick as the dust rising with the breeze. Can you imagine what it's like to see the pinnacle of strength and power, the top of the food chain, being held back not by another predator, but by a doubt. They growled, low, a sound that, instead of a threat, sounded like a guttural lament, a manifestation of their own helplessness. Can you believe this happened? The truth is, nature, even in its brutality, has its rules. Lions are programmed to fight against hyenas, against other lions, even against buffaloes. But a python? For them, that was a type of predator that didn't fit their patterns. They didn't have a script, a manual on how to react to a force that didn't come with fangs or claws, but with a suffocating pressure. It's like when we face a problem so bizarre and unexpected in life that all our skills and experiences seem useless. Who has never felt like they needed a manual to live? They were exactly like that. Pause and look at the uncertain glow in the eyes of those giants. They knew something was wrong, that their pride partner was in mortal danger, but they didn't know how to react. The lesson here is that not every battle is about brute force. Their loyalty was unquestionable, but the fear of the unknown was an even greater force. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. But the lioness didn't have time for them to overcome their confusion. The air in her lungs was running out, the strong metallic smell of blood, mixing with the odor of warm earth. With every second of hesitation, the lioness's life was slipping through the snake's rings. Her fate, and that of her cubs, seemed sealed. Where was the hero of the story when one was needed most? The answer was not in the form of a lion, but of a man who was observing the scene from his truck. His name was Ethan Hale, a park ranger, who dedicated his life to monitoring and protecting the pride. He knew each of them, and in a way that only a conservationist's heart understands, he felt a connection to those creatures. He had already seen the pride in peace, hunting, interacting, and now he saw them paralyzed by fear. Can you imagine what it's like to see a giant helpless? Ethan knew he had little time. The lioness wasn't going to last much longer. Human intervention in wildlife is generally a taboo, something to be avoided at all costs. But this was not a normal situation. He wasn't just there as an observer, but as part of an invisible alliance that linked him to that group of animals. The lesson here is about empathy, about feeling the pain of another, even if they are of a completely different species. It was a silent call, and he knew he had to answer. With his heart pounding, feeling the heat of the truck engine under his hand, he made his decision. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins. He picked up a piece of wood, more symbolic than useful, and began to walk towards the chaos. He wasn't a lion, but he had the courage they couldn't find. You know that moment when we have to act, even when our own logic tells us to stand still. It's a leap of faith, a trust in what your gut is screaming. It seemed like a sign from the universe. He stepped onto the savanna floor, the hot sand rising. In small clouds with each step, the lions saw him, and a look of recognition, of surprise, passed through their eyes. What was this human doing? But now, the stage was set for the final battle. The fight was no longer just the lionesses, nor the lions. It was a fight for life, and a man, armed with nothing but his determination, was about to enter it. And the python, too busy suffocating the lioness, hadn't noticed him. At least, not yet. The python, too busy suffocating the lioness, hadn't noticed him. At least, not until the sound of a dry crack echoed in the air. Ethan, with a courage that seemed to come from an ancient, pure place, struck the snake's head with the wood. It wasn't a blow to hurt, but to provoke, to break the monster's concentration. You know that tactic of giving a little shock to wake someone from a trance? He did exactly that. The python, dazed, let out a furious hiss, and for an instant, its snake-like gaze shifted from the lioness to the man. And it was in that second that the magic happened. The male lions, who had been paralyzed before, finally saw the enemy in a form they could understand. The monster was no longer an enigma. It was something that was attacking the human with whom they had a subtle connection, and most importantly, their own pride. As if on a signal, almost as if the universe had given an order, the oldest of the Goldes. 3 advanced, followed by the other 2. The silence of hesitation was broken by a collective attack. They growled, and the sound was no longer of lamentation, but of fury. The alliance was formed there, in the midst of danger, showing that true strength is not just individual, but collective. Who has never seen a group of friends unite to help someone in trouble? It's proof that our greatest strength lies in the support we give each other. The lesson here is that sometimes all we need is a little push, a signal from the outside, to activate the courage that already exists inside us. The python, caught by surprise by the combined offensive of the lions, and the man was forced to loosen its grip a little. The lions attacked the snake's back with their claws, while Ethan continued to distract it. The scene had completely changed. From an act of pure tragedy, the scene was now one of a rescue in progress. But victory was far from guaranteed. The lioness was still motionless, and the python was strong enough to fight them all. The struggle for survival was now in the hands and paws of an unlikely alliance. And now, what would happen? Would they make it in time? The survival was now in the hands and paws of an unlikely alliance. The combined effort of the lions and Ethan finally broke the python's hold. With the distraction of the lions and Ethan's strategic strikes, the snake, exhausted and wounded, released its deadly embrace and retreated into the bush. The relief that filled that space was almost palpable. The lioness, free, collapsed onto the sand, motionless, seeming exhausted, but breathing. And the lions, who had been hesitant before, now approached with a care that only the love of family can inspire. They sniffed their companion, licked her face, as if comforting her. Can you believe it? We tend to think that animals act out of pure instinct, but here we see proof that their empathy is real and that the alliance they formed with Ethan was not by chance. That rescue was not just an act of courage, but a demonstration that survival is more than an individual fight. It's a collaboration. The smell of wet earth and Ethan's sigh of relief mixed together. He knew the lioness wasn't completely safe, but the worst was over. He placed his hand on the lioness's warm fur, and for an instant felt a profound peace. The story of this lion family and Ethan is a reminder that compassion has no species, and that the bonds that unite us can be much stronger than the dangers that separate us. In the end, what distinguishes an animal from a human? Maybe it's not the ability to fight, but the ability to care about the fight of another. And you, have you ever had an animal that seemed to read your thoughts? One that taught you a lesson about life without saying a word? If this story warmed your heart, the next video suggested by YouTube will move you even more. Don't miss it. And if you've had an experience like this with an animal that changed your life, tell us about it in the comments. Your story could be the next to inspire thousands of people.